So before you get into collecting retro games, you can be caught off guard or you don't know the ins and outs of what to look out for. So these are 6 things you should know before you start collecting retro games. Number 1, Ian.
Budget correctly. This is a big one, and it's going to be a big make or break when you're looking at a system. Not all systems are equally priced. Not all are cheap. You don't have a lot of money. Collect Atari. NES collecting is getting, just for games, somewhat reasonable. Again, prices are going back down. You can pick up the stuff you like. Super Nintendo, Genesis, cheap systems, relatively, to collect for at a base level. Compared to some of the other big boys. Saturn, never cheap. Never will be cheap.
TurboGrafx,
not cheap. Dreamcast, consistently getting more and more expensive every day, especially the good games. And those are great systems, but if your goal is to, there are people who just kind of collect to display. So if you're just collecting, if you want to own the system and maybe a couple of representative games, to put on a shelf, and then you can, mod a system or whatever. Yeah, then something like the Saturn is fine. You'll drop a couple $100, get yourself a nice system, a couple of games, put them on a shelf. But if you're actually going to be playing the system that you want to collect for, and you want to collect, a chunk of a library, just, think about it. Because a lot of people who get into collecting, I saw it all the time at Luna, people would buy a Saturn, they'd get real excited to see one, and they'd come back, and it's not just us. They'd just be like, man, all I can play on this fucking thing is sports games because,
Sure.
even the shitty games at this point, are becoming more and more expensive. A copy of Sonic 3D Blast should not be however much it is. It's probably at least 60 to 100.
Sure.
And I like Sonic 3D Blast, but that's insane.
In general, like you stick with those cartridge systems that there's a ton of games for, that there's a lot more out there in general. So like NES, there are so many common games on the NES that are like $10 still probably or less, that are actually fun to play. That you pick them up, you play them, you don't feel like you have to save up $150 to play a game like Ninja Gaiden, So know the system you're getting into. And if you want to try like pre-NES systems because they're mostly cheaper, you want to try the Atari 2600 or the Intellivision, you can buy up probably 2/3 of the library without spending $1,000. Like conversely, like you can go out there and buy a lot of these games and have a ball and experiment. So just know your base console, what the like common sort of game price is for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yours is next.
Number 2. Patience. It's a virtue, not just in life, but when you're collecting anything. So a lot of people, when they collect, think of it as a race, unfortunately, where they have to gobble up everything as soon as they can.
Well, and there have been people who have treated it as that way. I mean, we saw that in the mid 2000s, or mid 2010s,
early 2000s,
like the 2015, 2016. We saw 2014. We saw a lot of people who got into collecting, who were probably they were like 25, made a lot of money in whatever job they got out of college, and they were literally going online and just buying whole collections, off of eBay. Within 2 months of shipping from various places, they had their fully formed Nintendo collection.
Sure. So if you have that money, you can do that. That's not as problematic in terms of, unless you get buyer's remorse, which happens sometimes. But this goes into the budget a little bit. The more patience you have, the more likely you will not to overspend. Most items that you encounter in video games are super mass-produced products for the consumers, most. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you'll never see these items again. Even an item that is rare, you will come across again at some point. It's just a matter of when. So this happened to me in my journey where I held out buying certain games for years because I knew I could find a savings, or I can get a better deal, or I could maybe find someone to trade with. And I would definitely, especially if you're on a budget, you have to be patient. If you're not comfortable spending on something, you can wait it out, because either you'll find a better price, or maybe you'll be in a better position where you'll feel more comfortable spending down the road. That happened to me as well. I was at a point when I first moved to San Diego. There's no way I was going to shell out that amount of money for the Panesian games.
No.
I did not have a great job. I did not have a lot of savings. But later on, I could spend on the Panesian games. I was in a better spot. Several years later. It took me about several years to get all three.
Well, and not only were you in a better spot financially, but by waiting a long enough time, you ended up finding a better deal on them than you probably would have.
Maybe. But the point is, like, there was no rush.
Right. There is.
Even some of me that was going for a complete set, I could wait. I could afford to wait. It didn't make me feel incomplete there. And yeah, don't buy more to save. I've been a person that this has happened to myself, where, if you see a deal, if you cannot afford it, it's not a deal, really.
Yeah.
Like if you're not comfortable spending $300 in a game that's usually $350, why don't you wait until you're more comfortable spending $350 on it? Like it's okay to do things like that.
Sure.
Don't feel like you force yourself to spend at the current moment to save hypothetical money you might not spend later on.
Yeah, don't get into it's like stealing sort of mindset.
Don't buy more to save all the time, but sometimes it makes sense, but not all. All right, number 3.
So this is actually just kind of like two sub tips, but this is more if you're buying to play and not just to collect. I find that there is a large number of people forgetting that you can try before you buy with emulation. Emulation and collecting, and this I've been saying this since the early 2000s, emulation and collecting go hand in hand because you can try the games you want first and make sure you're not buying something stupid. It's a great way to make sure you're buying something that you like.
The modern rental system.
And you're actually going to play. The other big thing if you're buying to play and not to collect is 100% always look at the import market. Expensive games for the NES, cheap on the Famicom. Expensive games for the Game Boy, lots of them cheap in Japan. PC Engine, 100%. The expensive games for the TurboGrafx are much, much cheaper if you're buying the PC Engine version. So where doesn't this work? This doesn't work if your favorite genre is, role-playing games. If you're an RPG collector or something like that, obviously that's not it's not as viable of a pathway. But platformers, action games, all of the stuff that was most popular, shooters during, like in retro gaming, the quick pick up and play games are mostly playable if you buy the import, and you'll save yourself a ton of money.
Number 4, sellers aren't always experts. You'll find on your journey, you'll encounter sellers of all variety and sorts, whether they work in stores, at flea markets and swap meets, at gaming conventions. They are not always experts. So one of the things that I wrote down here was you have to study. If you're a game collector, you have to put in work. Like it's homework in a way to understand each game console is its own unique ecosystem of what's interesting, what's good, what's rare, what is odd. You have to actually like put in homework. And to someone like Ian and me, it's not homework because we were like gradually introduced to it.
Well, yeah,
by osmosis. But if you're just like, if I had to start off today collecting NES games, a library of 800 games, and knowing the ins and outs of what's good, what's bad, what's rare, I would not know where to begin. I would be lost.
Absolutely.
You would have to go to, I guess at this point, if there's forums left, there's no modern TSR NES archive, but go to YouTube videos and look at hidden gems videos and things like that. So there's a lot you have to know for each particular console. I'd almost say a sub point for this is maybe focus on one console until you're comfortable before getting into multiple, if you can do that.
That's just going to be that's a personal preference, but I've always found it a lot more fun to collect deeply for few consoles than to collect broadly for many.
Sure. But sellers aren't always experts. I've encountered sellers, even, obviously I know a bit about game collecting, but there is stuff I do not know. But for example, I will say there was an incident, not an incident, but my friend was looking for a very rare Atari game at a convention. He found one. He came to me and said, "Hey, Pat, is this authentic or is this a reproduction?" And I said to him, "I think this is a reproduction, but I'm not positive. The problem is the answers we were getting from the seller did not give us any confidence that they even knew. So I said, stay away.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Sure.
Stay away from this. We're talking about a $1,000 game, not $100, not $200.
Right.
So I was like, stay away. So sellers may not always know, because the more sellers I encounter, I'm an old man now, they're younger than me. So they got into game collecting at a younger age. And for the amount of time it takes to really get up and knowledgeable on multiple systems, let alone if you're selling games, you got to know a little bit of every system. It's a lot to learn.
Sure.
So sellers will bluff about that sometimes. Some will say they don't know. A lot won't. You have to watch out. Ask ask collectors that have been in the game for a long time if you're not sure about a major purchase. Number five.
Number 5, buying lots if possible. This is this kind of hand in hand goes. I think it's harder to find lots in the U.S. now than it used to be.
Oh yeah.
Finding lots in Japan though, really not that difficult. However, if you can buy in lots, do it. And by lots, I mean you're paying just for a big box of whatever the person's selling, and you're not being picky about what's in there. So this is a good tool, whether you're buying to play or buying to put them on your shelf. If you're buying to play, you end up with tons of doubles you can use as trade bait, potentially trade-ins to, any local shops that you have.
Sales.
And if you're buying to collect, buying in lots is the easiest way to check off like 200 items in your list if you want to, because you'll end up with all of the most common games. No one leaves their house in the morning being like, I can't wait to go find bases loaded 1 through 3, but you'll get them in your lots.
Yeah, and I don't know how much the bots from the big like Lukey games ruin this. And Jay,
Sure.
how because we did this as a topic several years ago, how it was found out that bots. There were separate buying accounts for these the big 3 or 4 like DK oldies.
Oh yeah,
were buying lots up they were calculating and buying up lots. That probably they gamed the system, because then any deals that you might have found were going to just be diminishing returns. So I don't know if that happens anymore on eBay. Someone in the comments, let me know if you can still find like NES. Like it used to be like, here's 20 NES games for $25,
right? And
it could have been $40 worth of games, $50. You know what I mean? Like you could get ahead. I don't know if that's a thing anymore. But in person it is. You can still go to swap meet, game stores. You can go to conventions. You can bundle and save there. Again, if you're comfortable with your budget. And number 6, making friends.
Number of the beast.
What?
You said 6. 6,
oh,
6.
Did I?
The number of the beast.
Making friends in the retro gaming hobby is key. It's key to life, Ian. It's key to the success as well. You get leads. When you talk to the collectors, what is the first thing comes up? Do you have this? Have you heard of this? Hey, I'm looking for this. They know other collectors. They can lead you to a deal, or at least making friends, handshakes. That's how I got my M82 demo unit. I knew someone, and that's how I got the M8. Like someone who knows one, and you put people together that are crazy enough to spend the amounts of money I spent on those pieces of plastic. That's how that works.
That's how you got your NWC.
Because I knew Ian, and I didn't treat him like trash. And he reached out, and I verified it was real in front of when both of us did, and we all But yeah, I mean, which I added a little piece just to your number 6 here is befriend your local video game store employees. Don't be creepy, but go in there, be nice, say hey, buy your stuff, start up a brief conversation. Before you know it, they're not going to dread seeing you come in. And if they don't dread seeing you come in, they're going to pay attention to what you buy. And if they pay attention to what you buy and they like you, they might ask you for their phone number, and they might keep your games on a list behind the counter so that when they come in, you'll get a phone call. Oh, thank you. Ian didn't dread when I came in. And then eventually you start a podcast with them. So there you go. It can happen. It's possible. Why did you groan? It happens. It can happen to you and your favorite game store employee.
But I mean, I can't. It's true. But what I'm also saying is like that's a thing that I did a lot in general with good customers, and that's what all of our employees did. If you like the customer, if you're nice enough. And obviously we want to make money off of you, but we'll see stuff that comes in even if you're not asking about it. And hey, we might shoot you a text. We might let you know on social media. Come on down. This is here. I can hold it for 24 hours if you want it.
You might text me on my still flip phone that I had.
Yeah, I took a picture with a flip phone of the
an
switches.
NWC card. And I'm like,
No, I sent you. I literally just sent you a picture of the switches.
and I was looking at it, and I couldn't tell what it was. I had to remember, I was like, what am I seeing? A shelf?
Yeah, you thought it was shelving.
And you're like, no, that's a dip switches. And I was just like, what the it was a surreal moment back in, what was that, like March of 2009 or so, whenever that was, early 2009. It was nuts.
a while ago.
Well, I'm going to add one point here. God, I'm forgetting everything today on this pod. I forgot my other point from the intro I was going to make. I had another counterpoint that I forgot about. I was going to add a little sub note that I totally forgot about. So those are our six things you should know before you start collecting retro games. Budget correctly. Patience. You can emulate before you buy or consider imports. Sellers are not always experts. Buy in lots and make some friends. We're all here to have fun, share an insane hobby with each other, share some knowledge, and yeah, that's the key to life, right? Ian?
Have fun, enjoy yourself.
I can't believe I forgot what I was going to say for the last point. I had like a nice salient, like
A salient point.
I've just remembered. Collecting video games takes up space. Make sure you have enough space.
It's half the reason I got out of it.
This is very important. Know how much space you need. Closet space. Display case. Do you have an extra room or not? If you're one of those people that have a basement that I'm envious of, you can have a basement area for a gaming sort of room down there. Make sure you have enough space. It wasn't the reason I moved out of my condo, but boy, it sure was nice to move out of my condo to have enough space and have games crawling out of every closet and every corner. And out of my balcony. I remember I had my balcony in tubs and things like that.
I do remember.
Now they're confined to like 1.5 rooms. So when you walk into my Castle Country, you don't think I'm a crazy person that has games laying around. Mostly. That was the point I was going to make.
Mostly.